Mazie Hirano explaining why Democrats have a hard time connecting with voters. They're just too smart. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, joining us is former Speaker of the House, author of the bestseller Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback, Newt Gingrich. All right, when you read this thing on General Flynn, we find out, okay, that there are only 2 known instances in which individuals have been indicted for violating the Logan Act, the last of which came in 1853, and neither indictment resulted in conviction. And the other one that's mentioned is the Farrow Law, and we know that the DOJ issued a report that tallied all the prosecutions under FARA since 1966. That would be 7 cases with 1 conviction. Is this how deep we go to get a guy that served 33 years in the military that the FBI didn't believe was lying?
Sure. I mean, look, you have to understand, Mueller's not involved in a investigation. Mueller has a Trump destruction project. He brought on a team, all of them dedicated to destroying Trump. They've done everything they could to destroy Trump. And part of that technique, which frankly, Sidney Powell described brilliantly in her book, License to Lie, about the Justice Department, part of that technique is you throw the kitchen sink. You basically threaten somebody and say, I'm going to bankrupt you. I'm going to put your son in jail. I'm going to charge you with so many different crimes, you'll never get out from under it. Now, would you like to talk? And when you have the full power of the federal government against you, it's pretty tough not to try to find a way to get them off your back. But it has nothing to do with the truth. It has nothing to do with justice. And Mueller, I think, in a really sad, historians someday will comment that this was one of the most extraordinary efforts to undo the will of the American people by an established bureaucracy and its establishment friends that we've seen in all of American history. And I want to make one quick point, just to put this in context. Donald Trump, after 92% negative coverage for 2 years, 92% negative coverage for 2 years, is somewhere between 44 and 48% approval, depending on the poll. Ronald Reagan, about this point in 1983, was at 35%. The fact is that Macron, the wonder boy of France, is now down at 25 or 26% and just had the worst riots in Paris in 50 years. So the whole notion that Mueller is now the person who's going to go out and save America by destroying the president, I think is an anti-constitutional effort by the organized left.
So John Solomon just breaks this story. Now, we knew that they didn't verify the dossier, and it was not corroborated, which is part of their protocol
Sure.
and also part of the law. But now we see an email chain where they knew it had massive credibility problems. This is what he discovered, an email chain with all of these people's names in it that shows they knew that there were
Sure.
credibility problems to the very evidence, that the bulk of evidence that was used to obtain the FISA warrants, in the FISA applications, and they withheld all of that exculpatory information from the judges, as well as who paid for it, which was Hillary, and how it was a political document. How can they get away with that abuse of power?
Well, because they're the establishment. They're the fix. They're the insiders. They're the guys that the New York Times and the Washington Post and all the networks, except for Fox, all surround and protect them. They operated on a premise, and of course, they all thought Hillary was going to win. So they never thought this would come to light. They thought they were helping the winner. And I think it was an enormous shock election night to suddenly start, for Comey in particular, to suddenly start realizing that his neck was on the line. He'd been breaking the law, but he always thought he'd be protected. Everybody near the Clintons have been protected, as you pointed out earlier.
Comey's name is in this email chain. He's on the email chain. He signed off on that.
Of course. You had the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation actively trying to destroy a presidential candidate. You have the former head of the FBI, Bob Mueller, actively trying to destroy the President of the United States. I mean, there's a point here, and I know it's frustrating, but the fact is, this is a clear-cut drama. They hate him. They want to destroy him. It has nothing to do with the truth and nothing to do with the law.
Well, if we don't get everyone else that lied, that we know lied, under oath, if Hillary's never held accountable, you could say we have no equal justice or application of our laws. And that's the scary part for every American. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker, Fox News contributor, among many other things. How are you, sir? And good day, and it's great to have you back today.
I'm doing great.
We brought you in to talk about the headlines of the day. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's talk about the latest headlines from the last 30 minutes. Bill Barr, do you know him? Do you like the pick? Heather Nauert at the UN, do you like that pick?
Well, let me say, first of all, I worked with Bill Barr back in the first Bush administration and before that, and I've watched him ever since. He has great integrity. He is very smart. I think that he will be confirmed readily by the Senate, and he brings a level of stability and knowledge to the Justice Department that I think will be very powerful. I thought it was a great pick by the president. And it's interesting to me, in the middle of all this talk about Mueller and all this noise, here you have the president making a great pick for Attorney General and a very solid pick for the UN. Heather Nauert has worked very closely with Secretary Pompeo. She's been in the room for 2 solid years. And while Tillerson didn't have her in his inner circle, she was nonetheless in the State Department working issues, working with the president and his team. I think there's a real sense that she can communicate effectively. And remember, a major part of the United Nations ambassador's job is public diplomacy. Look at the great job Nikki Haley did. And I think that Heather Nauert is a very good choice in the same tradition.
Obviously, Bill Barr is a person you know, as you said, Speaker, would face some tough questioning in the confirmation process over how he would handle the ongoing Mueller investigation. Knowing him and his work, how do you think he will handle that questioning process?
Look, he's going to be very professional. He's going to be very, very well prepared. He will have thought all of this through, and he will, frankly, know far more than most of the senators who are questioning him. I think he's going to take a very solid position. He will be responsible. He's not going, he's not there to either be the president's defender or the president's attacker. He's there to be the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America. He understands this thoroughly, and I think particularly in light of the deep sentiment everybody felt towards President George H.W. Bush, having his Attorney General willing to come back and serve the country gives Bill Barr, I think, a powerful emotional ability to reach out to the senators in both parties and say, look, I'm going to do a job for America. I'm a patriot. I'm here because it matters, and you can count on my professionalism. And that's, frankly, all we should ask of an Attorney General.
Well, Republicans have the votes in the Senate, as you well know, and I would expect them to both to go through unless there's a big hiccup there. Now, there's a lot more to get to. You've got the Mueller map. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Bill Barr will get a great, substantial number of Democratic votes because of his integrity, because he's worked with so many of them over the years, and they know him, and they know that he's somebody who's going to serve the country.
Okay. On the Mueller matter, will Manafort be referred for a new trial? We're waiting to hear that today. On the Cohen matter, deadline day for sentencing guidelines. We'll see what happens no later than 5 o'clock today. James Comey is now behind closed doors, answering questions from House lawmakers Trey Gowdy, Bob Goodlatte, John Ratcliffe, and others. Here is Jonathan Turley, soundbite number 4, on the allegation that Comey is a leaker himself, and I'll ask you a specific question after this.
The one that I would ask and drill down on is his leaking of those memos after he left the FBI. He was tasked with finding leakers, and the minute it became something to his advantage, he became a leaker.
That appears to be Turley's main question. What is yours?
Look, I think the real question, and you had a little bit of this a few minutes ago from Trey Gowdy, the real question is the entire thought process by which the director of the FBI, who is supposed to be the nation's top law enforcement figure in terms of criminal law, what was his decision process both with Hillary Clinton and with Donald Trump? I mean, you have this guy who I think was rendering judgments that were way, way above his pay grade. He had no right to be doing a lot of the stuff he was doing, and it's never been completely explained. And the more we learned about how he ran the FBI, the more the people around him who are now in trouble. It's really, I think, a problem that we have to dig into ultimately because you can't have the nation's top law enforcement agency riddled with people who abuse the power for their own ideas or their own psychological interests.
Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, another fascinating day for U.S. markets. Looking at the Dow right now, it was just up 100 points. Now it's in the red. Following these markets will make you seasick. One day of Wednesday, no day of trading for a national day of mourning, but it has been a wild ride on Wall Street this week. A lot of questions and uncertainty surrounding trade. The president's top guy on trade, Peter Navarro, said this most recently.
We're going into this clear-eyed. At the end of 90 days, if they don't do what they say they're going to do, then we put the tariffs up more, and that's a good outcome because we are defending this country from Chinese economic aggression. Everybody in Washington now agrees that China is a bad actor doing bad things. The only disagreement we have is what should be done about it.
That was Peter Navarro talking to Brett Baer outside the White House. It's tough to navigate through all this and really find out what the president is going to get done on trade.
Well, let me separate the two. I'm going to really disappoint you on markets. I don't worry about it. Markets go up, markets go down, depending on when you got into this market. It's gone up so much, so dramatically for so long that it could go down a good ways, and most people are still going to be profitable. So I don't think you can tell from the daily confusion of the marketplace. On trade, we have a real problem. The Chinese have routinely cheated across the board in a way which I'm actually working on a book for next summer on China. And I think the subtitle is going to be Change or Die, because the truth is we can't allow the Chinese to continue to steal our intellectual property. We can't allow them to continue to have all sorts of one-sided deals on trade. And we have to recognize that this is a big country with a determined effort to become the leading country in the world. And if we don't find a way to negotiate aggressively and fairly and get a real change in their behavior, we're in real trouble in the long run.
Well, Larry Kudlow's making a round of interviews today, and what he's saying about this is that this is a national security issue as it relates to the trade talks and, well, I guess more to the point, the arrest of this businesswoman in Canada the other day. Here's the question. It's an elevation of matters, and it happened over the weekend, the same time the talks are breaking off in Argentina. Kudlow's saying that we've been warning them on this matter for a long time. I bet America probably is not aware that if you buy a Tesla that's made in China, a lot of times the data that's collecting that car goes back to Beijing. And I think if people became aware of that, they'd be a little more alerted to this. Here is the question. Has the administration communicated effectively to the American people what is on the line and what they're trying to execute?
No, they have not yet. And it's a major challenge to all of us. We've gone through a long period where all of us, I would include me, all of us kept hoping that China's opening up in markets would lead them to become a normal country, to follow the rule of law, to be a fair trading partner. And as Michael Pillsbury, in a brilliant book called The 100-Year Marathon, which is probably the best introduction to the problem of Chinese behavior, he points out, and he's one of the people who's had to change his mind, because the longer you watch them, the more you realize that the Chinese are engaged in it. And it's not that they're bad people, but their entire culture, their entire background is so dramatically different than ours that they regard cheating as routine. It's not breaking the rules, it is the rules. And we're going to have to be tough enough and firm enough, and it is a national security issue. They steal hundreds of billions of dollars a year in intellectual property. They have all sorts of equipment militarily that is basically American equipment that they stole through the internet. They hack routinely into the Defense Department. And this is very aggressive behavior, and it's not 12 teenagers in Shanghai. This is a division of the People's Liberation Army located just outside Beijing, which is actively dedicated to penetrating and stealing American intellectual property. This is the kind of stuff that has to change, and frankly, it isn't going to change easily. The Chinese aren't going to turn around and say, oh gosh, we really would like to be fair players now. They're going to grudgingly, day by day, over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, have to be drug into a fair relationship which will be very painful for them and a real change for them.
If you don't make the 90-day deadline, that would be a very important message for the president to deliver from the White House. Part of what you just said right there. Sir, thank you for your time.
Exactly.
Newt Gingrich with us today. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.